Hi everybody, Arica here of Fibers from Floss Canada.
Hello, Samantha here, the Hygge Stitcher. We are here today because it's May 1st. And for the month of May, we have decided to celebrate with many other floss tubers and many other stitchers, Mira May. So we're both really excited to be here today to share our tips and tricks, share our knowledge of Mirabilia, and to celebrate for the month of May, Mira May, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be awesome. I think we've both been stitching Mirabilias for a really long time, like almost 25 years, right? It's been a long time that we've been stitching, so it'll be good to celebrate that for sure.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do a quick shout out as well to Lisa with Crossed by Floss, because she was the one who started all this, right?
Yeah.
I think originally it was March Madness, and then she did Mira Madness, and now Mira May and Mira Mondays as well. So we can definitely tag her. She's got some cool videos out there for sure. She has some ones that do explain what Mira May is all about. So you guys can head over, check it out, and see if it's something you want to participate in. We definitely want to.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually the first time I've ever done it. So I'm excited to share what I'm going to work on over the month, and just excited to share some of my pieces with you all, and for me and you to spend time together and talk Mirabilia. We always have a good time.
Yes, so. For sure. Sam, did you want to tell us what was your very first Mirabilia you ever stitched?
Yes.
Do you remember?
So my very first actual Mira was the mermaid, oh gosh, what's it called? It's up above here. Siren of the Shipwreck.
Yeah.
And many of you have seen it. I've talked about it in so many different videos, and now it's in the background of my display here. But she was actually the first big Mira that I ever stitched. And that was
so
fun.
Beautiful.
Yeah, really fun. I remember, going through that process of like, it's so big. How do I start this? And I think during this video, we're going to answer all of your questions on how to tackle a Mirabilia. But this one was a learning process for me. I just jumped in. I started in the middle and I was drawn to the mermaid tail, right? That's why I chose that design. And so I stitched the whole tail, and then I was like, oh, I got to work up, and then I got to do the skin and the hair and all the beads. Like, I was overwhelmed. And so it was a learning process for me. And now I kind of stitch differently. I tend to stitch like saving the best parts of the stitch for last, because I know myself. If I stitch the best parts, I'm going to have a hard time doing everything else. So I learned a lot, stitching that mermaid, and
And remember the struggle too, when you would, a lot of her patterns are divided in half. And so you'd start at the center and you'd work your way down, which is really easy in terms of like just our brain and how we comprehend things, right? To flow down. And then all of a sudden you flipped over and you were like, oh my gosh, I have to work up. Like this is not... Right? The struggle was real, not wanting to work up, seeing backwards, and and now we have tips and tricks on how to do that. So that's very cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So what was your first stitch, Arica?
The first one I did was Tatiana, Queen of the Fairies. And that's this one here. Where's my camera? There you go. And so this one's still available, actually. She is from 1998, and she's MD 38. She was really fun. So I had stitched her because I was really drawn to her dress, and I didn't really plan on sharing her today, so she's not on a board, but this is what she looks like. She is just beautiful. I don't know if you can see that okay.
Yeah, it looks great.
And then the dress is just like so much comfort, block stitching. The wings are so shiny. I don't know if you can really tell. Oh my gosh,
I love her.
Arica, she's super lovely.
Arica, I have so many amazing memories of you stitching that pattern, because it did not take like 3 months. Like, you stitched on that for a long time, and I remember hours and hours of us sitting together while you were stitching on that one. I can remember. Yeah, she's
even beautiful. Looking at like, you're right. Like, we just dove right in. No hesitation. And looking at the quality of the stitching it's definitely different. Than,
totally.
How I stitch now.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. Because when I stitched my mermaid, I stitched her a long time ago. I don't remember what year. It was like early 2000s. Yeah. And when I had finished her, I tucked her away, put her in a drawer. But I framed her recently, like in the last 3 years, I framed her.
Yeah.
And when I pulled her, I was like, whoa, my stitching, like, I was kind of embarrassed. But I was like, okay, I'm getting her framed. I'm taking her to the frame shop. And when they framed her and stretched her onto the boards and everything and put her, I was like, whoa, she looks amazing. Like all my stitches got stretched out and look awesome. So don't be afraid of that.
Don't worry too much, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I thought we could start with addressing what is a Mira, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone hears, you know, I'm stitching a Mira, blah, blah. What is that, right? Who designs that?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we could kind of speak to that a little bit. So
Sure.
did you want to dive in, or do you want me to?
Go for it. You go. I'll chime in.
So for Miras or Mirabilia designs, right? And those are designed by Nora Corbett, and it originally was a bit of a partnership between her and her husband at the time. And Nora Corbett, she's amazing. I mean, she does Mirabilia, she does Nora Corbett designs, which are both the same designer, but they are different lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, when we look back with who Nora Corbett is, I mean, she has a fantastic story, right? You look at her mom. Her mom is a very was a very well-known designer, and she was known for Lavender and Lace, Told in a Garden, Butternut Road. You know, when I think about, I mean, she really kind of started the movement, right, of what, you know, what we now see as cross stitch, right? If you think about how cross stitch used to be kind of in the 80s, you know, it's funny because Nora Corbett, I rewatched a video of her recently, and she talked about cross stitch in her mind prior to working with her mom was kind of what she referred to as potty art, you know, something you would see that was stitched and hung above the toilet in the bathroom, and kind of really, you know, tacky and not something that was really beautiful and classic, right? Mm-hmm. And so her mom ended up stitching and said to her, you know, you should join me and we should work together. And she was like, I'm not making potty art. Like, that's not what I want to do. But she was drawn to, you know, making something that's classic and beautiful, timeless, you know, inspiration from tapestries and from the artist Klimt, and just really classic pieces, right?
Yeah, I want to jump in. I wanted to say, like, when I stitched the mermaid, in my mind, I had thought to myself, this is going to be a piece that's going to be passed down generations, hopefully. Like, I considered it like one of those pieces and I thought to myself, you know, these designs were done in 1990s, right?
Yeah.
And in the 90s when these were created, I mean, it is now 2024, and I look at them and they're beautiful. Like, I don't see the age of those times gone by, right? So I would hope to think that in 20 years from now, somebody in my family is going to see these and be like, these are still beautiful, and I still want to look at them and put them on my wall. Timeless pieces. Yeah,
sure,
and I fully believe that her designs have lasted generations. And also, Arica, your mom used to stitch Nora Corbett's mom's designs, right?
Yeah,
like that's how this kind of started.
Yeah, her mom's name is Marilyn, and the very first design, so she used to be a fashion illustrator, and her very first design ever was the quilting by Told in a Garden. And my mom, she stitched that. I think she stitched that in the must have been mid-90s. And she has it framed, and that was her very first design that she went out and tried to market, and, you know, to see if anybody would support her in the sale of that. And that's where it all started. So very, very cool.
Isn't that interesting? Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I have that they kind of started working together, and that Nora Corbett went to a couple different art schools. And what I didn't realize is that she used to design like department store window fronts, like the actual like the big Christmas displays and stuff like that. She used to design all of that, which is really cool. And then mid-90s, she ended up kind of going out on her own, and Mirabilia was born, right? Which was awesome. And her very first pattern was the Bumblebee, which is a free one from 1994. So I think that's a really cool one to, you know, anyone can log in and with Chilt Design, Mirabilia Designs online, there's a free section and you can go and download that. And it's a simple, easy one to start with. So
I've gone and downloaded all of those free patterns and made a little stash for myself. And Bumblebee is definitely one of the ones that I want to complete.
Yeah, me too.
Definitely.
Well, and I
Yeah.
have some paper copies. I was going through my stuff today, and I guess her mom used to release like little Christmas design, like free Christmas gift from her. And so I
Yeah.
have some printouts from like 1994, 1996, and they're very similar to the little cherubs that Nora has done as free ones as well. So
Hmm.
definitely a cool concept to have the free designs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, what else do we know about her? I have some notes here, that she's not really a stitcher, right? She
No.
draws, she paints, she knits, but stitching is not really something that she likes to do. And did you want to talk a little bit about her process, the special paper she uses, and how she
Well, yeah.
designs the
I mean,
Mirabilia?
I've never met Nora Corbett, but I have watched a lot of interviews where others have gone to meet her in person, and she shared some stories, and I'm glued to the screen, like I want to know everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's a dream of mine to meet her one day. But yeah, she does have a really unique process. Her vision and then the way that she designs and the way that it is carried down to the stitcher, her thought process on that is actually really special, I thought. You know, she uses a gridded paper, and she hand draws her designs. So, you know, I would imagine that she would, you know, as an artist, it's almost like painting over the grid, right? You know, with her colors. And then she goes and does her symbols all by hand. And I have to this day never found another designer who does it this way, that understands how we read the chart. Like a lot of people use
Yeah.
digital, right? Digital programs to do their designing. And it's almost like they don't consider the stitcher sometimes, where like the symbols that they use so that your eye is drawn to certain parts of the design.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and I think Nora Corbett gets that because she's actually visually on paper designing it and
Yeah.
using certain symbols to show the darker colors and the lighter symbols and the simple little dot in the center, like the white or the lightest color of yellow, or, you know, little things. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like we're in her, she always describes it as like we're in her head, you know,
Yeah.
because I feel like I am sometimes, right? Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I understand her a little bit and how she designs and how I'm reading the chart. It's like like she had described it, and you had mentioned this before about hand to hand to hand,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's awesome. You know, when we look at her patterns and the finished product, you can see like the brush strokes in the dresses and in the ribbons. And, you know, people always say she just has this flow, you know, with her ribbons just flow so perfectly. And that's because that's her brush stroke, right? Like that's, it does have that great flow because you can see the movement from her sketching it carries all the way through the design. There's nothing that looks artificial or goofy or, you know, they're just beautiful classic pieces of art. And as
Yeah.
a stitcher, that's really fun to stitch. You know, you end up with that block stitching, that comfort stitching where you are starting at a tip and then you're flowing through and you stitch this whole section, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, the shadow below that. And it's really, really neat to stitch it. Like it's just such comfort stitching. You do feel
Yep.
like you're in her head. You're following
Mm-hmm.
those actions. Yeah, I just think it's
Yeah.
really cool for sure. Yeah.
There is actually nothing more exciting to me than when you go to the store and you pick up a Mirabilia chart and then you get to open it for the first time.
Yeah.
It is such a special experience. Like I usually can't wait. I'm like, okay, I'm in the car already opening it up. Like, okay, I want to see what this one looks like, because it is literally art. Even the actual pattern, when you open it up and you fold it open, you can like, I'm already envisioning how I'm going to stitch it. Like, these are the colors I'm going to do first. I'm going to start here and there. And yeah, just the experience of like opening it up, the little sticker on the back, like it's just an experience that I don't think you get from any other designer. Like I can't think of anybody else who does that. Her charts are special.
And she's even talked about the packaging, right? The packaging's designed after a package of pantyhose, where you get to, you know, have that peeking the look-through window in the back. And she wanted the whole process just to be special, right from, just from opening it up. And it's smart too, because it's easily accessible. Everything there, if you're in the store, you grab the pattern, you want to kit it up, you just flip it over, and it's all right there, you know?
Yeah. But then you've
It's the
also
whole
done
thing special.
It is. But then when you're at the store, you don't know what's inside. Like sometimes you can flip over a chart or flip through a book and be like, I can see the charts, I can see what's, but this is a secret. Like you can't know what's inside until you get home and open it, right? So that's special. I think that's really cool. But yeah, you're right. You can just look at the back and be like, I need 32 count, stony, whatever color. And there's your flosses and your beads, like easy.
Yeah,
Pick it up.
absolutely. Yeah. So I think a lot of people are, we made a video and said, are people interested in a Mira video? And I was shocked at the amount of comments of, yes, I have a huge collection and I'm too intimidated to start even one.
Yeah,
and,
that's common.
that's what really drove us in just promoting this and trying to get you guys to just dive right in. It is really that simple. You guys can cross stitch, you can make a simple X. These are just a whole bunch of X's. And then in the end, you're going to do some X's with some special thread and, some beading. And it's all that simple if you break it down. But I thought it'd be neat just to touch on the Nora Corbett as well. She's designed Nora Corbett, and that's something she did entirely on her own. And she refers to it as kind of the gateway drug to a Mirabilia because they're a bit, the designs are smaller. The stitch count, instead of being, 170 by 250, you do more Miras than more Noras than I do. Would you say they're about 120 by, or 100 by 140 maybe? They're a little bit smaller.
Yeah, they are. So 140 by 140 kind of.
Sure.
For a Nora. Yeah, typically. And yeah.
And they all still have some fun in there, right? They all still have some of the chronic and some of the beads, and it's just all a little taste of something. But it's a smaller size design. So
that's how I started. I started with a Nora Corbett, and I was like, because I had never beaded before, I had never purchased Kreinik in my life. Like, I was like, what am I doing? But watching you stitch a Mira, I was like, I definitely want to stitch one. So, I selected this one here, the middle pixie, and you're right, Arica. It had a little bit of beading, not too much, had a little bit of Kreinik, and then mostly just cross stitch, right? And it's a great way to get your, dip your toe in and try one because you get to experience the colors, the flow of a design. I always highly recommend to people that don't go for a design that looks too complicated. Like if you see blocks of color, you see, a little bit of Kreinik over here, like nothing too confetti, because some of them are like, even just to show you this one, I can see blocks of color in that. The broom might be a little bit of like, okay, a little of this and a little of that. But the majority of it, you've got great block stitching. That's what I suggest looking for the first time. Find a design that you love and look for those blocks of color because then it's just simple cross stitch. Like nothing crazy,
I love her story too with her very first Nora Corbett design, how her and her husband had divorced and she was at home and she had all her kids. She said she was super broke, didn't know what to do for work, just where do I go from here? And she thought the only thing that she knows how to do is to make art. And so she designed her first Nora Corbett and it was Tiger Lily, which we'll put a picture in here, is beautiful. It's arguably, I think, one of the best Nora Corbett designs she has ever done. The colors are vibrant. It's gorgeous. I think you've stitched that one too, right, Sam?
I have, yeah. And that because of that collection, I was like, I'm stitching all the Pixie Couture collection. Like, I love that whole set. That's what got me hooked. So I'm still stitching them today. I'm still working through them. They're really
and
fun.
her second design for that was a reindeer, which you're working your way through that whole collection too.
Yeah. So I must have been falling in love with her designs right around the time she started the Nora Corbett line. And because I was all in, everything I saw was like, yep, I'm doing those too. Yep, I'm doing that one as well. I haven't been able to get through them all. This is my lifetime worth of stitching and I haven't been able to get through them all. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's still so many more that I want to do, but I'm sticking to, the ones that I fell in love with originally and going through them.
That's very cool. Okay, so a couple things that I just wanted to mention, you know, if you are using a Mirabilia design or Nora Corbett design, that she does approve of making it your own as well. So if you want to make any sort of changes, if you, instead of, and we'll talk more about this, but instead of beads, if you want to do French knots, if you want to change and do a color conversion, she endorses all that and thinks it's absolutely fabulous. So if you're a bit of a creative person, go for it. Don't hesitate. And I know some people can be sticklers on, oh, the designer doesn't like this. She loves that.
Okay,
she gets really excited to see it. Yeah.
I want to say I've never made a change ever. Like I stick to exactly what the chart is because I trust the process. Like I'm like, it's going to be beautiful in the end. Just keep going.
Absolutely.
But I also enjoy the Facebook group page where people have done conversions. And it's kind of cool. Like it's cool to see, you know, maybe it's a different fabric. Maybe it's a totally different colored dress. Like it is cool when people are brave and are creative and do their own color conversions. All to them, but
and you almost don't recognize some of them, right? Like
sometimes,
like, what is that?
Which one's that?
Like, oh, that is beautiful. And she also endorses photocopying for your own use to make a working copy. So if you're someone who wants to preserve your original paper pattern, or if you like to highlight. I know I've looked at a couple of my old charts that are out of print, and I'm like, can I even sell these? Like they have, you know, green highlighter all over them. Which as a stitcher, if I really want it out of print, I'll take it if there's highlighter on it. I
totally don't care. Yeah, I have
charts. Maybe it'll be a giveaway. I don't know.
This one here that I had received, this was actually from a local stitcher. Her mom stitched it. She stitched it and I've stitched it. I'm the third person to use this pattern and it is beat up. Like, you know, but I've still managed to be able to like work it out. And I'm like, oh, that symbol, the chart's a little faded from the fold marks or whatever. And I was able to figure it out. Totally, but I'm the last person who's going to use that chart for sure.
So I thought maybe we should dive in and actually talk about, you know, okay, now you've decided you're intrigued, you love the look of a Mirabilia or a Nora Corbett, you want to dive in, but you're really not sure where to start. Maybe you don't have an LNS, you know, what are sort of some designs to start with? And I know you kind of briefly touched on that already about, you know, something with block stitching that looks a bit more simple, or starting with a Nora if you're a bit intimidated on taking on such a large project. So a couple things to consider, I think, and jump in here, Sam, with anything that you want to add. But just realize that whatever you're stitching, stitch one that really, truly speaks to you. Because some of these designs, especially a Mirabilia, you know, if you stitch only one project, you could maybe do it in like 4 or 6 months. But you know, for a lot of stitchers, it's a couple years. And if you have a lot of projects on the go, you know, it could be 3 or more years to complete. So
true.
If you do Mirabilia designs and go to the website, they do have a master list of all the Mirabilias as well as Nora Corbett's current print and out of print. And you can actually pull up each picture and see which one you really, really love. And I would recommend buying what you love for sure.
Absolutely.
And I think the other big piece is affordability too. You know, what is your budget for working on one of these pieces? They can be quite expensive. You know, I've been watching a fair bit of Flosstube in the last week and a half just about Mirabilias and seeing what people's thoughts are on it. And a lot of stitchers have said, oh, I can kit it up for $100. And I thought, no, you can't.
Depends.
You know, maybe that's what I tell my husband. It's just going to be $100, right? But, you know, I think you could definitely do a Nora Corbett probably for just over, you know, if you're dealing with the US dollars, 100 or 120. But the Mirabilias are, I would say, $150 to $200, depending on the treasures that are needed.
Yeah, some of them can get right up there. So I've seen like mermaids that have like, you know, 12 big crystals, right? And then all the beads and then all the like it can add up real fast.
Well, and I did Adia the garden fairy, and she has that belt of all those treasures, and I stitched that in about 2009. yeah, about 2000. And I had to go buy those treasures. Because I didn't buy the pattern. It was I was stitching, and my boyfriend at the time, his mom was like, "What are you doing?" And so she went with me to the stitching store one day. She bought the pattern, and then she was like, "I can't do this. This is crazy." So I took the pattern, but I didn't have any of the beads or any of the specialty flosses. And at that time, I think it was like $120 for those treasures, beads, flosses. And she bought all the DMC and the fabric, right? But I did a quick breakdown just in case you're totally new to Mirabilias. Most patterns are about $15 at your LNS, depending, and these are all US dollars. So $15 US. If you're looking at an out of print pattern, it can be absolutely ridiculous. We won't even talk about that. That's your choice, right?
Yeah.
Really, really love the piece. For fabric though, for Mirabilia, you're looking at a larger piece of fabric. Generally you need about 22 by 27 inches. And so by the time you purchase that, about $40 to $50. Just for something standard, not even necessarily something hand dyed as well. And then the DMC, there's about 30 to 40 colors for each one. So depending where you're buying your thread, I mean, that could be another $30. And then you have your silks and some patterns. There's probably some that don't use any, right?
Yeah, there's some that don't, yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of them have at least two, some have more. And those, you know, they're $7 a silk. And then you have all your beads and your treasures, and depending on, you know, which ones they are, those can run you a lot of money for sure. Yeah, so by the time I add all that up, it's well above $100 for sure.
Yeah.
You can see, if you look at Sam behind her, you can see all of her go the other way, you can see all of her blending floss and her cry neck and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so despite having stitched, you know what, 20 plus of her designs, every time you go to stitch something, you still need to buy more. Like when she designs, she's not working from a confined palette. She has the entire palette out.
Yeah.
And she just, you know, works from that. So although we see some repetition in certain colors, it's not purposeful, but it does end up, you know, as a stitcher, you need to buy more stuff every time. I mean, we all.
Yeah. I think that's why I kind of was drawn to her designs too, was because like most of the time it is simple DMC. That's all you need. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it was like, you know, when you go to an LNS and you see all the fancy things, you're like, what do you even stitch with that stuff? Like, you know, you're kind of intrigued, but you don't know what it's for. Like, you know, being able to like purchase cry neck and purchase beads and get a silk here and there. It's kind of fun to have like different things to be able to experience, you know, as you're stitching this design. I want to jump in and just say that when you're kitting up a project, you don't have to go out and kit the whole project all at once. Yeah. Like, as you and I know, like kitting up a project is part of the fun. Like I have projects that I'm currently kitting up. I'm in the processing of put together. But if it's your first one, don't feel like you have to invest the whole amount and get everything all at once. You can start off with purchasing the fabric, the pattern, and your DMC. Go from there, you know, 3 months in, 6 months later, if you're ready, you've got great progress, you can go and purchase the cry neck and the beads at that time. You know, you don't have to do it all at once. There's stages to a Mirabilia. You can still enjoy one and kit up, you know, twice throughout the year kind of thing.
And I think Lisa with Cross by Floss, she doesn't use the beads either, right? She has opted to do French knots instead of the beading, which is really beautiful also. And it does keep your costs down too. So, I mean, there's so many options. And I think that, you know, financially that shouldn't be a deterrent. If you really want to try a Mira or a Nora Corbett, there are ways to do it for sure. You know, you can definitely knock that price way down based off of, you know, the fabric you choose to use. And just get going. Just start.
Get going.
All the specialty stuff, that's what adds up. Do that later, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's embellishment packs you can buy. We'll talk about that when we talk about beads. But there are ways that you can kit up so things are a little bit cheaper too, which is good.
I hope that this video will help inspire, you know, stitchers. Like, as a lot of us, you know, I get comments on my videos all the time. I love what you do, Samantha, but not for me, you know, because maybe they might be too scared to try it, you know. I just think that it's something that if you're wanting to dip your toe in, I hope that this video helps a lot of people that are like, have so many questions of how they do it. You know, you appreciate the artwork, but you're just like, how? Like, you know, it just seems so intimidating to some people. So I hope that this helps.
I think it will. And
Yeah.
something that I like to do too is I like to just order the pattern and throw that extra, you know, $15 charge on top of something I'm already
Yeah.
ordering. And then when I get the pattern, I love
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, open it up. Like you're saying, right? It's the
Yep.
process of opening it up, checking it out. Ooh, and you can see, you know, the design and how things flow. But then you can actually just take your time
Mm-hmm.
to flip over to the back and really think about what you're doing and what you need. You know,
Yeah.
go through your DMC stash, tick off what you have, make a list of what you need,
Yep.
and then look at that pattern, because maybe that pattern only has you know, one silk and about $15 in beads, and then, you know, that's quite a bit more affordable. Or is this
Yeah.
a pattern where, like you said, you're in the process of kitting some up, where
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe you're just going to add on a silk or two with every other thing that you're ordering, you know what I mean, where you're going to kit
Yep.
it up over the course of, you know, 6 months or a year. I have a little video. So I have a birthday start that I started last
Yeah.
month. And what I did was some recording during that time to just kind of help walk everybody through the process of how Samantha and I work on a Mirabilia. And I think for the most part, we do everything the same, really.
Pretty much. Yeah. You taught me everything. So.
I don't think there's much variation there, but so what I'll do is actually cut over to a video where we talk about the back of the pattern, and all of her patterns are the same, whether it's a Mira or a Nora, but I'll go over, you know, the whole, where is mine here? The whole back of the pattern here. So looking at, you know, the description, the flosses, the specialties, and then underneath here are usually some special directions as well. So we'll cut over to that. Okay, what we're looking at here is the pattern kit list. All Mirabilias look exactly the same, as well as Nora Corbett patterns. At the top there you will see the name of the pattern as well as the designer, which is always Nora Corbett. Right next to the name you'll see a little teeny tiny MD and the number, and that will be Mirabilia Designs, and the overall number 1 through whichever her latest is. This particular pattern was her 21st design. Right below that is the copyright with the year it was produced in 1996. Followed by that, you will see the required suggested stitch count, as well as the color of the linen and which manufacturer they recommend. They also have whether or not they would like you to stitch 2/2 or 1/1. Mirabilias are almost always, and I think are always, 2/2. Some stitchers will choose to do some 1/1 for the skin. DMC floss will be used, which is found directly below here, followed by some Mill Hill beads, and whether there's treasures also, and some threads, any silks, and then additional supplies needed at the bottom. Design area is listed right at the top, where you will have the finished design area and a finished stitch count. Just remember, when prepping for our linens, we want to add at least 3 inches on each side of the design area. So where you're looking at 15.5 inches is the width of the design, you actually want fabric that's at least 21.5 inches by 25 1/3 inches for this fabric, for this pattern, sorry. So in looking at this here, in terms of kitting up, the first thing that I typically look at is the fabric itself. You know, whether or not you choose to use something that is actually recommended, or if you want to do your own, either way works great. If you are choosing to do your own fabric, please be sure to do a floss toss, and we'll talk about that next as well. In terms of kitting up, we can go ahead and look at our DMC floss. And the way that I typically do it will, I'll start at the very top here, and I like to put all my floss for Mirabilia in floss away bags. Okay, so let's talk about fabric selection. You know, all of the Mirabilias and Noras, they do have a recommended fabric. Recommendation is always on linen, but sometimes there are, and I think all the new ones have the alternative recommendation of Aida as well. I think all of her designs are 32 count linen. Is that right, Sam? Have you ever
Yeah.
seen anything other?
No, for me, I usually I see the 32 count and that's what I stick with. You know, to be fair, back when I first started stitching these, I was scared to try anything different. You know, and I've always stuck to the called for fabric. I've always stitched on witch help fabric, that whatever it's called for, that's what I do. And over the years, I have tried, you know, to like venture out and try, you know, maybe a hand dyed fabric. And this is where I get a lot of questions. I don't know about you, but I get a lot of questions about this on my channel about, you know, if I do a hand dyed fabric, do I need to downsize? Do I need to go to a 28 count? Or, you know, and to be honest, I don't have that experience yet, like to back that up, but I have done a hand dyed fabric before. Can I show it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Yep. So Midsummer Night Fairy was done on a hand dyed fabric. And now I purchased this fabric way back when, and I don't know who the designer, like which, it might even been a hand dyed fabric from the store. Like somebody at the store might have hand dyed it. I'm not sure. But it was a different experience for me. Her face and her skin, some of the lighter colors were sort of peeking through. It might not show here, but I could see some of the darker fabric behind her skin. And I did have a little difficulty putting in the beads, and this one's full of beads, full of Kreinik. So what I did is every once in a while, if I ever came across like crowding, I would, you know, skip a bead here and there. If I was like, it's not going to go, but just skip one, you know, move down, keep going. Yeah. And that's what I did. In the future, though, there is a fabric hand dyer, hand dyed by Rolanda. She does some really beautiful fabrics, and I do see a lot of Mirabilia stitchers choose her fabrics to stitch on. And I want to try one. I want to try like maybe a 28 count, maybe even a Lugana instead of a linen, you know, like just something completely different to get that experience, to try something different. But I will say, like when I hold this up, this is absolutely beautiful on a hand-dyed fabric. It's stunning. Like no complaints. It's beautiful. And then when I look at some of my other Mirabilias that are done on the called for, same thing. I still walk away thinking this is stunning and it's beautiful. Sometimes the fabric is hidden in the back and the cross stitch is the focal point. Sometimes you have fabric where you're like, I want to, just the way that the fabric is laid, certain colors are changing on certain parts. You want like, oh, if that's sort of like, maybe that's where the moon goes, or you can get really creative with different kinds of fabric and have fun with it. So I encourage that too. But my experience mostly is on called for fabric. Yeah. And I still enjoy it.
I did a couple videos on Flosstubeversity talking about linen, Aida, etc. And there's a couple considerations. So when you're using a hand-dyed fabric, some fabrics with natural fibers, they do shrink. Even the more they're washed, they shrink. And so the natural fibers are cotton and flax, which is your linen. So anything with linen that's hand-dyed or Aida that's hand-dyed will shrink for sure. Anything that is even weave or Lugana, those are made with rayon and blends, and those never shrink. So they also don't pick up the dye as well. So if you're looking for really, like some of the really stunning modeled hand dyeds are usually the linen, the cotton. From what I've learned, a lot of stitchers will actually upsize in their fabric. So they'll go from a 32 count up to a 28 count. So the holes are a little bit larger, which they think will just make up for any shrinkage in the over dye process of those like beautiful modeled fabrics. And there are quite a few stitchers that stitch exclusively on 28 for Mirabilia for that reason. I think Fiber Arts Amy might do 28 as well, actually.
Yeah, and I would love to try one of her fabrics one day too.
Oh,
I've been, you know, because
amazing.
she's been creating some really beautiful things. So one day, it's on my wish list, you know.
Yeah.
One day I want to try one, and I would actually like. I trust her opinion. You know, if she has created a fabric for a certain design, I'm like, I'm tempted to try that, right? Like she thinks it's going to look great. I want to try that too. So she's someone to definitely go check out and learn more about. If you haven't found Amy before, go check out her channel and learn about her linens and her Luganas and Ada. She does everything. So.
And she's a huge fan of Mirabilia,
Yeah,
Nora Corbett. And she does the Queen City Retreat too, right? With Nora Corbett. So yeah, she's an awesome person to follow. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I think that if you are wanting to do a different fabric, definitely go for it. But if you're choosing Ada or if you're choosing linen, I would go down to a 28 count. Go up to a 28 count. Otherwise, if you're doing called for, I think the 32 is fine. But even I've noticed in the past some of mine where I have stitched on the called for 32 and it's heavy with beads. There is, you know, I have a space where I have to fit 5 or 6 beads and I can only fit like 4 or 5. So like you said, Sam, I just drop one out of that line, right? And all in all, you don't really notice unless you're very closely.
I've never been able to figure, like when I look at this, I can't figure out where I've skipped a bead. Like it was so crowded, you know. I just like them to, I personally like them to lay like perfectly, like just that perfect, like right in where the X cross stitch is supposed to go, that's where the bead goes. So there's times where you just skip one here and there. My Mermaid of Pearls that I did, that one was the heaviest beaded project I've ever done, and that happened to me too. I don't stress about it. I'm like, skip a bead, no big deal, keep going.
Yeah, for sure. And in her design, she has not a ton, but she does have some fractional stitches. And so that's why they recommend the linen, just because it's easier to stitch fractional on linen or even weave or Lugana. A bit more difficult on Ada. It can totally be done. You just need a sharper needle to pierce that fabric. So if you're an Ada stitcher, feel free to stitch these on Ada. I mean, they turn out beautifully. So yeah, it's absolutely a good choice.
I don't find that those fractional stitches, they're really mostly to do with the skin. Like if her arm is beside the dress, you know, you've got the 2 different colors, that's where you'll start to see them. Maybe a little bit in the face to get the definition, like you're doing the eye,
the chin, or
exactly. It's not overwhelming amount of those types of stitches. It's usually around the skin or a wing and a dress or something like that, right? Where you see 2 different parts of the design. That's where they are.
And then the last thing I want to talk about with fabric too, and your fabric choice, if you want something alternative, to consider the mood that you're creating with your fabric, right? So I often think of Sam and all your mermaids and the Hygge Stitcher, right? She uses the most amazing fabrics, oh my gosh, but it really sets the mood, right, of like the mermaid in like a deep dark sea, and you know, and then there's some opalescent shine in there, and it looks like water. It looks amazing, right? Or you know, maybe you want something that is like lighter and sparkly, and you're going to use that in the background for one of your winter scenes, so it looks like it's a cool crisp morning. There's so many different options, so just consider the feel that you're creating with your fabric choices, right?
This can get me stuck sometimes because I'll have an idea in my head like, okay, I have a Santa and I want the background to be, you know, like winter wonderland, whatever. And I this is where I struggle. I'm like, give me the cold for fabric. Just, you know, because I almost need someone else to be like, Sam, stitch it on this. It'll look great. Like, okay. But for myself, I have such a hard time coming up with it. Like, so sometimes I just skip. I'm like, just give me the cold for I just want to get going. I want to stitch on it, but I'm trying. I really am. I'm trying to branch out and try new things and try different fabrics. It just takes me a long time to make a decision because I'm scared. I think there's others out there that can relate to that, right? Like
Absolutely.
Just being nervous about trying something different, but.
And also, you know, what time of day is it? Is it, you know, what you're stitching? Is this something that is like a night scene? You know, then maybe you don't want to go on a nice bright white fabric. Maybe you do want something that's gray or a bit darker, you know, and vice versa, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
and that has happened to me. You know, I have had challenges with darker fabric too, which can lead to the enjoyment of the stitch. So sometimes, you know, if you're like, I'm experienced using a darker fabric, I know I can do it, like, okay, go for it. But if you haven't really experienced that, maybe try something smaller, like a, you know, a Nora project on a fabric like that, just to try it out, because if it's challenging, you might not enjoy the process as much.
Right. Could you imagine one of the witches, right? Her witches on some sort of dark, like spooky.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
I don't know, it'd be awesome. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then in terms of fabric sizing too, we'll talk a bit about this in one of the videos we're going to cut to, but just making sure you have a good framing allowance. And I personally always leave 3 inches and then maybe a bit more, because I might be so close to the width of my fabric, I'm just going to leave the extra inch on each side. Yeah. But generally I try and do 3 at the top, the bottom, and then the right and the left.
Me too.
What about you? 3 as well?
Same here. I usually, I mean, it hasn't happened to me any, like where I needed a bigger piece, but usually an 18 by 27 is what I need for a Mirabilia. Like I haven't run into that where I've needed to buy a bigger piece than that, but and then it just depends, I guess, like how much margin
depends on what you're
get.
stitching, I guess. Like you think about like Rapunzel and stuff, that had to, and Muka, those have to be wider than 18.
You know what? Rapunzel was a regular size, but I think you're right about Muka. Muka was a big piece.
Because the one I'm doing right now for my birthday, I'm doing Fairy Idol, and I needed 21 and a half wide by 25 and a third. So yeah, I mean, sometimes whatever you can, if the way that the fabric goes and you're going to, you know, if I need 21 and a half and it's a 20, I can make it work, right?
Make it work. Depends what it is.
You're gonna 2.5 on each side. That's fine.
I should say, when I stitched my Mermaid of Pearls, at the end of it, I was like, man, there is not enough like left. Like I was like, I don't know how they're going to frame it. Like it was so close to the fabric. I didn't have my normal 3, right? But they were still able to make it amazing and beautiful and no problems. But I was nervous, you know. I was like, I like that 3 inches around just for comfort. Like just I
leave some room for air.
Yeah.
I think they can do it with 1 inch. Yeah, but I like that, the comfort of, like, you know.
You could get different colors of matting. You could go as big as you want. Like you could make the decisions.
Lots of options.
You know, you'll have all the options if you got that 3-inch border all the way around, just to be safe.
Totally.
So
let's say now you've got your pattern, it's at home, you've chose your fabric, it's arrived, and you think, okay, I'm ready, I want to just dive right in. What can I, you know, I'm just going to grab my floss and start stitching. There were a couple things that I just wanted to flag for people. Not everybody does these things, but some are some good ideas, and you know, maybe something you want to add to your practice. If you're using an over-dyed fabric or a hand-dyed fabric, and if you're thinking that you may want to, some people like to wash their projects and some people don't. And if you want to, if you're a washer, you should wash that fabric before you stitch on it. Because if it's going to shrink or if it's going to bleed, you want that to be happening before you get all your flosses in there, and then all of a sudden your white is blue, right? And if you're washing fabric, I personally always throw a color catcher in there, as well as some vinegar. White vinegar works really well, and ice cold water, nothing hot. Right? What about you, Sam? Do you do the same?
Well, yeah, I was going to say it's pretty close. When I was working at Lizzie B's and spent time with the framer there, sometimes she would like charge a little extra if your fabric needed to be washed. And I was always like, okay, how are you doing this? Just tell me everything. And her trick was she would use cold water, a drop or 2 of Blue Dawn dish soap. That's what the suds were. And then she used a splash of vinegar and a dye catcher. And that's what she used, you know, and she had like, sometimes some things would come in and the person would be like, I know it's in bad shape. I spilled coffee on it. I'm devastated. Like, what can you do? And she would work miracles. And it, like, she never changed what she did. It was a couple drops of Dawn, so a splash of vinegar and cold, you know, and that's how she would get stains out. That's how she would get it freshened up. And so that's what that's what I've been doing. And I've only had experience washing a few pieces, and so far it's worked out great. So,
And I haven't washed, honestly, I think I've never washed a Mirabilia. I've washed some other pieces, but I don't think I've washed a Mira before.
Yeah, I didn't wash my mermaid or
Yeah.
the other mermaid I have down here, but I did recently wash this one. So I have been mentioning that I've been wanting to bring them out of, hibernation. Basically, they've been stored in a drawer and they have got the big crease in them from folding the fabric. And so it's been a mission of mine. So I started off with this one. I haven't touched my other ones yet. And this was the hand-dyed fabric. I was nervous about it, right? Like, what's going to happen to this? And I did exactly how I described to you, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. And then I just hung it up to, I did the whole, lay it on a towel and roll it up and that sort of thing. I didn't wring it or anything like that. And then I just hung it up, used a hanger, a very simple clothes hanger, pant hanger thing, and hung it up in the closet. And it looks amazing. I'm so happy with it. Thank goodness.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then once you have your fabric too, we like to serge our edges, and a lot of the stores will actually serge for you. If you don't have a serger, there are a couple other options, right? If you take a sewing machine, you can just do a zigzag stitch all the way around the edge. And I'll do that one time, and then I'll go over it a second time, and that's always worked well. I chuckled to myself because there's one I pulled out today. I'm not going to show. Or maybe I showed this already, but look at this. Back in the day, they used to tell us to put masking tape on the edge. So this tells you, this tape's been on here for 25 years. I should probably just frame it,
Take that off.
So you could always tape it if you wanted, but, people might frown about that.
Yeah. I had projects that I did that with too. Not anymore.
Yeah, for sure. The next thing, it's important to iron your fabric, especially if you're using Aida or linen. And the reason is because fabric actually, with the natural fibers, they get what they call fabric memory. So something that has been, not just off a bolt and then folded and sent to you, but something that, the dyer or, the store that you're buying it from, is it something that's prepackaged and has been folded for a long time. Yeah. Those folds will always be in your fabric till you can get them out. And if you're not washing your fabric, you're going to really struggle there. So the recommendation is, and we'll talk about this a bit here too, is ironing on the hottest setting with the most amount of steam possible. And it's really that steam and start with dry linen. It's the steam that's going to work out those creases. And don't go in a circle and don't stretch it. You just, the fabric should be sitting on top, the iron on top of the fabric, and just let it kind of skate over top of it, no pressure. But you do want to be going with the warp and the weft of the fabric. So you just light irons up and down and then side to side, just so you don't stretch that, right?
That makes sense.
And sometimes, to be honest, I had a fox and rabbit. It was the Duxbury one. Oh my God. Yeah. I probably ironed it for 25 minutes. Not a word of a lie. I was like, this is ridiculous. Why? Because I couldn't get some of the creases out. It was crazy. And Duxbury is beautiful. It's like an overdyed fabric, and it was linen. And then I have my ironing board, and I have a couple pads on top, and then I have the protector that goes over top. And when I was done ironing, I was like, I had some water on my floor. I had used so much steam to get out some of these creases that it had actually gone all the way through my pads. I had to leave my ironing board out to dry.
Oh my God.
It was crazy. But I got them out, but it took me a full 20 minutes. It was insane. So the point is that if I didn't work really hard at getting those creases out now, and I don't plan on washing that project, I will never get those creases out. And depending on your framer, if they can pull it really nice and taut, they might be able to. But I have one Mirabilia where you can kind of see there is a bit of a crease in there. So definitely work out those creases before you start.
Beforehand.
Yeah, don't just dive right in.
Yeah, I've never done that.
I was going to say, you look like you've never done that, Sam.
I've never done that. But but maybe that's why I'm in this spot. Like, because I remember when we used to stitch together way back when. One of the things you used to always tell me was when we would put our projects away that you would always like fold it in a different fold. Like,
Yeah.
I tend to like fold it in half and fold it in half and then put it in my thing, and it's like the same fold over and over. And like you would just change the direction, change the way you were folding every time. And I was always like, oh, and sometimes I try to incorporate that, into when I'm storing my project, thinking about things like that sometimes. But with a hand-dyed fabric, I haven't had that issue. But with the witch out fabric, it is because it's like stiffer. And sometimes I've ordered it from certain places and it's been folded a certain way. And you're right. Like I always see those lines. And now I'm kind of like, maybe I should have ironed it first. I'm hoping that after I'm done my stitching a wash, because I'm okay with washing it.
Yeah,
after
the wash should take it out.
Hopefully, I have two more that I'm going to be working on over the month of May. So I'll update you all on how that worked out for me later on.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing to talk about is floss toss.
Yeah.
Right? So once we get, our fabric is ready, we've got everything is good to go, pulling out. This is the other benefit to kitting up the whole project right away is that you're going to be getting all of your flosses and all of your embellishments, and you can really lay it out on your fabric. And if you're using culled for fabric, you don't need to do a floss toss. It's totally fine. Just dive right in, right?
Yeah.
But if you have selected something, and quite often, like I don't have an LNS, which is crazy considering where I live, but I don't. And so I order everything online, and online it looks really good. It looks like it's going to be perfect. But then when I get it, it might have a green undertone to it, or maybe it's a little bit cooler, a little bit warmer. The color can be different in person, right?
Yep.
So do you do a floss toss every time, or only when you're doing different fabric, or what do you do?
Only if it's different fabric. But lately I've been having fun when I start a new project. I think it's kind of fun to lay everything out, put your beads, put your cryonic, and just take a nice aesthetic photo for Instagram. And when I forget to do that, I'm always mad at myself. I'm like, oh, I forgot to take a photo, but that's kind of fun too. It's an experience from start to finish. So I think it's worth doing the floss toss to see all the colors, lay it all out. Okay, I'm ready. Take a photo, dive in, go for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, let's cut to a video here where we walk you through a floss toss and a little bit about fabric.
Okay.
Okay, so here we are at our floss toss. Now, this is arguably one of the most important steps in choosing your fabric for your cross stitch project. Choosing just the wrong shade or something that perhaps looked really good online and it arrives and it's just, the undertones just don't jive well, that can make or break your whole stitch. So there's definitely a few things to look at here. When, we lay out our colors, it's nice to have a bit of a gradient going. And what we're looking for is some sort of contrast between the flosses that we'll be using to stitch, as well as the fabric itself. So the fabric I've chosen here, I think does have a fair bit of contrast, which is good. The colors do all share the same tone underneath. Even though initially you think, oh, blues and purples, it's cool, but it's actually quite a warm color palette. All of those colors in here, none are stark bright white. They all have a warm tone to them. So in choosing the fabric, this also does have a bit of a warm background. It's not something that is, although there is gray in it, it's not a cool gray, it's a warm gray. Some other options just to show you examples if I was to throw some fox and rabbit seaweed with that, does that work with those colors? The colors, sure, they do work. They do offer some contrast. Is it, what I'm looking for? Probably not. When we look at their greens here, they do kind of just blend right in, but one could argue same with the blues. You have the same sort of situation. So there's a consideration for that when we look at our stitching and where those colors are in our pattern as well in terms of placement. Are those colors is this border colors, are those colors placed right on top of this fabric for the border? If so, not a good choice. But perhaps if some of the brighter colors are on the border, then that's a better choice. And then this could be on the inside. It would actually pull the piece together very, very nicely. Other options are something a bit more neutral. Does that work? Of course. Neutrals always work as long as you have a warm palette and a warm linen. They will always work well together. Is it the best choice? I'm not sure. When I'm looking here, and of course colors are hard to discuss over camera, when I look at like this color in particular, it doesn't work. This is very muddy and dirty, and this is quite a bit warmer and cleaner. I really don't like those two together. Whereas all the pinks, the yellows, you know, the purples, the greens, they all look excellent with that fabric. When I look at this other fabric, this is Silver Moon, and it's a Lugana, and it also is very cool, crisp, and clean. Now, does this cool fabric color work with these floss colors? Sure, it does work. I can pull it back a little bit so you can see it better. You know, it does work, but it makes, there's a bit of a too stark of a contrast really between, you know, the warm color palette onto something bright and cool. And if that's what you're going for and you really want your piece to pop off the fabric, then this is an excellent choice. Now, there's also, you know, pattern consideration as well. I'll put a picture here on the side of the pattern I'm stitching. So when I look at this one here, Fairy Idol, you know, she's sitting in her bed frame, 4-poster bed. I get the feeling that it's kind of evening. You know, she's got her bunny there. She has an owl, which makes me think of evening. And so do I want something that's really bright, sort of indicating like a daytime scene, or do I want something that feels quite strong, indicating a bit of maybe a night vibe to that? And so I personally, it comes down to personal choice. I like that night vibe. So that's the fabric that I'm going to be rolling with for this project here. Okay, bear with me here because I'm holding the camera and ironing at the same time. Now, in terms of ironing, we need to recognize that fabric does have memory, and it's really important when we first get our fabric that, one, if you plan on washing your cross stitch later, that you actually do wash it now to pre-shrink any shrinking that might happen later on. Second of all, you need to use an iron. It needs to be actually on the highest heat possible, which is your linen setting, and you need to have enough steam also, because steam is what's going to get all of these wrinkles out. And don't be afraid to iron it, you know, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, whatever you need to do to get those wrinkles out now, because if you don't get them out now, some of them you'll never quite get them out. Remember, when we do iron, we're going to not want to pull in all directions. We want to go along with the warp and the weft as well. So we're going straight up and down and left to right, no circular motions. So here we go. It's pretty hot. I just kind of keep it moving. I don't know if you can see, but it's like steaming away. This iron is just one off Amazon. It's nothing special. I'm actually disappointed because I replaced my old-fashioned Black & Decker I had for maybe 20 years, and that thing got hot, but the steam function died. And so I had to buy a new one, and this one just doesn't get quite as hot. Okay, so when we look, it doesn't look like it's wrinkled anymore, okay, but guaranteed it will be. So what I'm gonna do is just continue to pull along and iron the whole thing the first time. I do also like to leave the tag as long as it's right on the selvage edge, and I'll note the, I'll take the fabric, the sticker off the fabric and put it here too, so I can recall, you know, the count, the make, and the manufacturer of that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish ironing this up. Okay, so this is a rather large piece of linen, so I'm having a hard time getting it all in the frame. But what we can see here is that, you know, there is a bit of a center line that I can see here. I have ironed it lots. It is nice and flat. But, you know, after so many times of packing and sitting in storage, sometimes these lines are really, really difficult to get out. So I'll give it another go, but just realizing that I probably spent about the last 12 minutes already ironing, particularly along this line and this packing line that you see here as well. Sometimes fabric that has been modeled in the dyeing process, you know, it does appear to be quite wrinkled in this area. However, when you know, you have a feel, or if you look at it from eye level, it actually, the wrinkles are all out. The only two that I can't really get at this time is this one and this one, and that's okay. I'll work a little bit more on it. The next thing I wanted to just kind of do from this angle too was talk about modeling and our project. So with my project, unfortunately, I bought a used one and the picture is gone. So I do have a picture that I've been referring to on my iPad. And so when I look at the picture here, you know, we do have this open area above her head, as well, really the bottom half is full coverage. So I need to consider what part of my fabric should go where the chandelier is there, and if I want that to be darker or lighter. When I look at my fabric here, you know, this being the top and this being the bottom, or vice versa, where do I think it would be best? So I can either end up stitching my lady this direction here, where we do end up getting some of this dark modeling, could end up sitting about this area here. And when I zoom in a little bit closer, there is a fair bit of whites and lights there that could pop right off that pattern, but then also looking at some of the darker, and a lot of that is really, really dark brown, and will that pop off of that dark modeled area? I do think so. It is lighter in real life than it is appearing on camera, so that's one possibility. The other possibility is to actually have it turned the other way, and have the lighter side of the fabric. So if we go up again, you can see we have our dark area down here, and this area is a fair bit lighter. Do I want to have that lighter area at the top where the chandelier is? And I think for myself and my own preference that yes, that's what I'm going to go for, because we do have a chandelier which would be, you know, theoretically emitting some light, leading for a lighter background as opposed to the darker background. I do think that one sort of splotch is a bit dark for my liking, and so to have that in behind the dress I think would be ideal for me. So the next step we're going to do is I'm going to go back and iron a little bit more, but the next step we're going to talk about is actually landmarking and starting your cross stitch. Okay, so it's kind of hard to get a good angle without, you know, strapping something to my overhead lights. So this is how I'm gonna roll for the next couple minutes. I wanted to point out in the pattern here when we're talking about lengths as well. So we did talk briefly about the design area being 15.5 by 19.5. So if we're talking 15.5 inches wide by 19.3 inches long, we need to remember to add in fabric for framing, which is, you know, at a minimum 1 inch and ideally up to 3 inches. So I have ordered a rather large piece. I have plenty of space. So I'm going to go with a 3. So 15 plus 3 on one side and 3 on the other side is going to give us a total width of 21.5 inches. And the same deal on the length. So 19.3, 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom is going to give us 25.3 in length. So roughly I'm going with 22 by 26. So, and those are all in inches. So we can show you here just with my tape measure, looking at the width that we do actually have. So in length, I gotta work around my camera here. We have about 26 inches to the selvage, and we need 22. And then in length, we need 26, and altogether we have 36, so about an extra 10 inches. Normally I would just start right in the middle of our fabric, but this time, because there is an extra 10 inches in length, it would be, I mean, you could use that to do a couple little smalls on there if you wanted. So what I probably will do is, instead of cutting the fabric at this time, is I may just mark where our 10-inch line lays. Okay, so I just grabbed some pins. What I'm gonna do is just put a pin roughly at the 26-inch mark. That's gonna be about here. Okay, and so we can see anything past that pin is going to be extra for us. So no need to cut it this time. I will cut at a later date, but that's okay. What we want to do now is find our center, and literally, if you're using such a large piece of fabric, you can literally take the whole thing, fold it in half lengthwise, fold it in half on the sides, take that corner point, and that is your center. Now, because I am working with an extra 10 inches, what I will do is measure the center of the width, which I think was 26, was that right? 26. So the center point is going to be 13 inches, which is roughly there. And now we are going with, so 26 wide is much more wider than we need. Remember, we only need 22. So it's going to give us actually 5 inches for framing on each side, which is more than enough, but it's not enough to really save to stitch something else on, unless you are into stitching something small like a bookmark. So if we look at what is remaining, 26 in length is what we need. Half of 26 is 13. And so just make sure we get that there. We're gonna say 13 here is the middle. And now remember, when we're dealing with 3 inches of border, it doesn't matter if we're off a couple threads. You could be off an inch, and honestly, it's not going to matter. So when I look at this being the center, yes, this is definitely the center line here of my fabric. Is it perfectly where, you know, where perfectly is 13 inches across that way too? And that's actually going to be right at the tip of where my needle comes out. So what we can do is actually go like this and know that our center stitch needs to be where that's going to intersect. Okay, I will cut the rest of that later. Isn't that the best thing about these things? It's so fun to zip them up. So here's the thing about modeled fabric and starting a cross stitch. You know, we had just landmarked and everything looked great, and then I was taking a closer look and thought, wait a minute, I think I should stitch the other direction. And I hope this isn't too confusing for people, but you know, when I look at my length, I have 36 length, which is more than 10 inches extra, and 26 width. But the width I require, sorry, I don't want to confuse you. The length of the pattern, including 3 inches for framing on each side, equals 26 inches, 25 and a third inches, which I rounded up to 26. So I could choose to stitch this as the length instead, and, you know, end up cutting off just short of what I do need of, you know, 22 inches in width. And then I have even a larger size fabric. There's less wastage there. And so I started looking at the modeling, and something I saw that's really interesting is, I'm just gonna move this forward for you. Hopefully nobody gets, you know, motion sickness. When I look at potentially stitching here on this piece, I don't think I can really tilt this camera. I think it just falls from that direction. It's okay. So if I look at landmarking, you know, these pins would be my width and this would be my length coming down here. And when I look at the very center of the pattern, I pulled it up. My girl's knee comes right like this, and then her dress all comes that way. And she's sitting kind of like this, and there's a chandelier directly above her knee. Now, look at this fabric. Do you see what I'm seeing? Do you see this little bit of dye? This is like a center fold from the modeling dye effect. And so how great would it be if I actually had the chandelier? I mean, this is crazy business, right? Like if you're learning to stitch on linen, don't get into any of this crap. This is insane. But what if I line the chandelier up on that? Would be kind of neat, you know, and realizing that with the dye effect, you know, it is a bit uneven. There is a darker strip here, which is wider on this side, but it kind of gives the illusion of light. So I'm actually going to do some crazy little math calculations and figure out, but I may just kind of finesse my starting point by a centimeter or so, just in order to line that up. When I do look at the current line up here, if we look at this being the center line of my stitch, you know, we're just missing, this is the center of that little dye effect. So if I move it over, just imagine if this was in the middle here. So if the chandelier is coming down this way, I think I might actually do that. Yeah, looking at the other side of the fabric, I can just slide this down for you guys. You know, there's really nothing special about the dye effect. It's a bit darker at the top there than at the bottom. Yeah, I'm just gonna measure out the pattern a little bit and see what I want to do there, and then we're going to get started. Okay, so that concludes part 1 of 2 in this series. We're going to share part 2 with you later on this month. We did want to touch base though about what our plans are for Mira May 2024. And Sam, do you want to go first? Do you want to let us know? Because this is the first time we've done Mira May, either of us, right?
Yes, and I thought like I have quite a collection of Mirabilias that I have on the go. So I want to do 2 things to celebrate. First, I want to have a new start. So I have a project that I've had kitted up. It's been waiting for me to start stitching on. And that is, I'm going to get a start on the Cottage Garden Fairy.
Beautiful. She is so beautiful. And that wand, right?
It's the wand. It's the butterfly wings. I love this. This is MD 63. And one of her older charts, 2002, this came out.
Yeah,
love the beautiful colors. Love it. I'm stitching it on 32 count Pictureless Plus. It's called Oaken. So this is the second one that I've ever done. That is Pictureless Plus. It is sort of like a sandy brown. There is some really great modeling in the design, in the fabric. That I think will look good. I've done a Floss Toss. There is a lot of like pinks and blues in this design. And I've got my floss away bag. Yeah, there's purple, there's gold colors.
There's so lots. Beautiful.
And this
And what are those?
So I was introduced to a Verissois. They have a metallic thread, which I will fill you in later on in the month how the
Is that what it calls for though, or is that something you're sampling?
Sampling.
Very fun.
Never done before.
You're making your very first change ever to a Mirabilia.
I am. You know, I'm stitching on hand-dyed fabric and I'm using a Verissois. Come on, who am I right now?
I love it.
So that's going to be part 1 of what I want to do for Mira May, how I'm going to celebrate and contribute. Obviously, the video with you, this new start. And I also want to do, I've been thinking about doing this on my own channel, is I want to do like a Mirabilia whip parade video where I would talk about my past finishes, talk about my current whips, like current works in progress, and then my collection of patterns that I have left still to kit up. So I think that would be fun to do too. So that's how I'm going to celebrate. What about you, Arica? What are you going to do?
I don't know. I've gone back and forth on what I should do, what would be, you know, financially responsible to do and what I'd like to do. And so, I've decided to do a few things. I think this video is really cool to release, you know, at the beginning of the month, and then we're going to have another one sort of mid-month. The weeks in between those, I like to do some tutorials that are more specific to Mirabilia design. So I'm going to do a tutorial on beading, and I'm going to do a tutorial on how to convert to 1/1 for the skin. So I think those will be really fun to put out for everybody. And then for myself, for stitching, I'm going to spend a week working on my Fairy Idol, which is my new start, and a week working on the Royal Games.
Oh, I love that set.
Yeah. So, because I've made some good, that's a smaller one of hers actually, and it is a Mirabilia, but it's sized more in keeping with one of the Nora Corbett's. And so I'm going to make some good progress on that. And then I have another new start that I'm kitting up right now. I know.
Which one?
I was like, what are you talking about? I'm going to do this one.
What? You're going to do a mermaid?
I am. This is Bluebird's Princess. And it's also from like 90. Oh boy, I can't remember the year now. I'll put it in the screen for you guys. I think it's like a 95. It's a much earlier one. But the problem with that one is in kitting it up, it calls for a lot of Magnifica beads.
Oh.
And so I just found a place out of the States that has some, and I've ordered, but some of those are, you know, $12 a package for a couple of those. And I need 9 packages.
Oh my goodness.
But you should see this one. Like, you see the pictures of this one on Instagram. It's unbelievable. Like, it's unbelievable. Anyway, so I'm going to start that one.
Yeah.
And then I'm also dying to start the very first pattern she's ever released, and that's that free Bumblebee. Bumblebee one.
Yeah.
So I've ordered everything for that, and it also does call for some Magnifica beads as well.
Oh, does it?
And it does, but I have found them.
Okay.
So I've ordered some. I've ordered some for you too, so that we can at least do it together, which will be really fun.
That'd be so fun. Yeah.
So I think a week on each of those projects, and then with our filming, and that will be a very, very full month, I think, for...
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I'm excited for you. That's awesome. Mermaid!
I know. It'll be my very first mermaid, actually, so...
Oh, Arica. Yeah, absolutely. You know, okay, so I want to talk about something super quick. The topic of the word fancy ladies. Like, everybody says, like, I get it all the time, like, oh, Samantha, the Hygge Stitcher, she stitches fancy ladies. And I'm like, I've never stitched a fancy lady before. I don't consider mermaids and pixies. I stitch mermaids, I stitch pixies, I stitch witches, I stitch reindeer and the sleigh. Like, I've never stitched a fancy lady, but to an exception, I guess, like Rapunzel, but she's like fairy tale. Like, I've never actually stitched one of the like fancy ladies. Yeah.
I think people just kind of interchange that for Mira, though. You know, they think Mirabilia, they're all fancy, right? They all have the embellishments, and
you're right.
It ends up being but technically,
you're right though.
You don't stitch fancy ladies.
I just consider, like, to me, I think of a fancy lady and I think of the queens. I think of like Queen Autumn, and you know, there's some where it's all about the dress and where they're sitting on a throne or something like that. You know, like I consider those fancy ladies. I don't know.
For sure.
Okay, I'm just going off on my own little.
But when you do look at her collections, right, she has her queens and she has her fairies and her pixie. Well, then you get into the Nora Corbett with like the pixies and some more of the fairies and stuff. But for Mirabilia, the bigger ones are, you know, the queens. And then she's got some of the ladies, like if you think about like the Met or, you know, Christmas is it Christmas in Paris or London? Like, to me, those ones are the fancy ladies, right? Where it is a lady and she is just draped in like beautiful embellishments, you know? And you know what? When
Nora Corbett designs different patterns and she releases them out throughout the year, she always kind of talks about or mentions like, this one's for my mermaid people. This one's for my queens, you know, like, because there's stitchers out there that are like, those are the ones they love. Like when a mermaid comes out, they lose their minds, right? Like, oh, another mermaid. yeah. Right?
Totally.
And oh, I hope this starts to happen for you. I hope you fall in love with your mermaid and, you know, want to stitch more of them because they're amazing. It's the
I
tails.
know. I
Yeah.
already know I'm going to love them.
Yeah.
You know, just the details. And yeah, and the tails and the jewels. And I like the Lantis one. There's a lot.
Oh, there's
There's a
so
lot
many
of
good
hers I
ones.
could totally stitch.
Yeah. They're so
Can't do
good.
them all.
There's so many good ones.
Yeah,
We
for
could
sure.
go on. I think we could literally have a 3-hour video about Nora Corbett's designs. Like it could go on forever. And
Yeah.
you know, I want to invite everybody to watch the next video because you know there's a lot to talk about and there's a lot to learn, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so part 2 will continue on. We'll talk more about the beading and floss and stuff like that. But there's just too much to put in. Nobody wants
In
to
one
watch a
video.
3-hour video, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be good. Well, thanks so much. If you've stuck this long, thanks for
Mm-hmm.
watching. And I hope you guys are all participating in Mira May. We certainly are very excited to dive right in. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.